Cheaper than a telescope, I guess.
All right, there we go.
Alright, so the title of my talk is Settling Mars, the next chapter of the human saga. Sounds a little melodramatic, maybe, but if we pull this off, I think it's kind of big. So, I just drove out here from Lake Louise, and beautiful area, through the forest, through the mountains and everything. You know, and when you're being considered for something like this, it changes the way you look at things, changes the way you look at Earth. I'm looking out the window and I'm just going, wow, this planet is beautiful. So full of life and water and air. You're all so lucky to live here. You have a beautiful planet, and here's mine. A little bit deflated, couldn't quite fix the aspect ratio properly, but it should be round. So this picture was taken by the Hubble Space Telescope from Earth orbit during the perihelic opposition of 2003. Does anyone remember this? Oh, one in the back, there you go. How about this? Did anyone get the email back then saying that in August, Mars would appear bigger than the full moon in the sky? Well, a couple of you got that email.
Getting it.
Does anyone still get that email every August? Yeah, me too. Well, that was kind of a bit of a exaggeration. It didn't get that big, but it did get very close to us, less than 56 million kilometers away from us. And at that moment, when this photograph was taken, every human being alive was closer to Mars than anyone had been in nearly 60,000 years. 60,000 years. That's a depth of human history that people aren't used to thinking about. I mean, what the hell were we even doing 60,000 years ago? We were waiting for God to create the heavens and the earth. No, actually we were spreading. So our particular variety of human, Homo sapiens, arose in Africa around 200,000 years ago. Hung around there for 100,000-ish years, and then some small bands of people started to move around. They moved up into the Near East, and then out into Asia and Australia, and up into Europe. And at some point during our wanderings, we don't know when, we made perhaps the most amazing discovery in human history. I'll get back to that in a moment. But look at this. Some of these people crossed some pretty significant expanses of ocean. Can you imagine coming to the ocean for the first time? And just looking around and just going, all right, beach to the horizon that way, beach to the horizon that way, and then just water that you can't drink. Is this it? Is this the end of the world? It's just, there's land, and then there's just not land. And then there's just water for what? For all eternity? Forever? Does it eventually turn into something else? Fire? Or does it turn back into land again? I don't know. I know. Let's get some trees, tie them together, get on it, go over the horizon and find out. Imagine the first time that somebody proposed such a project. You want to do what? Let me get this straight. You want to get a few people together, some guys and some girls, pile onto that flimsy little thing, and then you're just going to say, bye home, bye family, bye friends, we'll never see you again. And then you're just going to cast off into the infinite abyss, no idea if you can survive the journey, or if you even find land, if you can live there. What if you find land, and it's full of snakes, and spiders, and syphilis, and everything that terrifies you? You have no idea what's out there. Why do you want to go? And I can imagine the answer. I want to go because I have no idea what's out there. And they went. And some of them survived. And they left descendants. Descendants who were shaped by the things that they saw around them in their lands. And these people, we don't know who they were, these pioneers of the Pleistocene. They're not written in our textbooks. But we know that these people gave us all the geographic and cultural diversity that continues to enrich all of our lives right now. Christine, have you been in my slides?
Sorry.
So about that amazing discovery, we discovered that we were not alone on the planet. We got into Europe, actually a little bit before we really got there, a little bit in the Near East, I think we first found them. But we discovered the Neanderthals. People who had been living in Ice Age Europe, surviving multiple glaciations, adapting to the climate, and... Sorry, I gotta skin you, Fred. There we go. And you can see some of these adaptations in their skeleton. So you see on this guy here, so that's a modern human to the right, and this is a Neanderthal. You can see he's bulkier and he's got shorter limbs. And these are adaptations for conserving heat. So, and this is seen in mammals whenever they move into cold climates. They tend to get these adaptations. And both of these, of course, would have led to them having a high BMI, if you were to look at their body mass index, because they've got more mass for their height, because the shorter limbs make them shorter, and then they're bulkier, right? So actually, by the World Health Organization standards, most Neanderthals would have been considered severely overweight, and many of them obese. That's kind of important. I'll get back to that. Meanwhile, in the present, Mars One was founded in 2011 in the Netherlands by Bas Lansdorp and Arno Wilders. And their plan is to send 40 people on a one-way mission to Mars, to settle Mars. And the funding for this is going to come mostly from the sale of meteorites. So broadcasters are going to pay to have live broadcasts and pre-recorded broadcasts of the tailing end of the selection process, which is already underway. There's 705 of us now, they've whittled it down. And covering the end of the selection process, and then the training process, which is going to be quite long. There's a lot of training and a lot of things you need to know to go to Mars. Like being an astronaut is only a small part of that. We're astronauts for 7 months, and then we're settlers for the rest of our lives, living on an alien planet. And these people that they want to send are going to be representatives of all of us. What they did was they opened up online applications. Anyone in the world could apply. So just, any random nut of a forest somewhere could make a profile. And what they did is they made a minute-long video, and you pay a bit of an application fee to open a profile because they want to have, they want to filter it out so that only serious people, serious, actually go through and make a profile because they have to review all these, right? The selection panel. So, you make a minute-long video and a quick summary of who you are, and then there's a private portion as well. This is all public. You can just go on the internet and see this. But then there's a private portion where they give you sort of some essay questions, like an example of a time when you faced fear and how you handled that. So people filled all this out, and by the end of the opening for applications, the application period, in September of 2013, they had over 200,000 applications. People who said, yes, I want to go to Mars and never come back. So they're out there, these people who want to strap trees together and go over the horizon. These same kinds of people. Well, there we go. On December 30th, 2013, they announced their first round of candidates. So they picked 1,058 people, so about 0.5% of the original applicants. I remember getting this email. I was sitting at work and I was putting together electrical panels, what I was doing at the time, and all of a sudden my phone vibrated and like, oh, I got an email from Mars One. Cool. I get a lot of newsletters from them and whatnot. They're always interesting, and I opened this up, and this was the first time they addressed me by name. Dear Mr. Graham Christensen, you and only 1,057 other aspiring astronauts around the globe have been pre-selected as potential candidates to launch the dawn of a new era. Human life on Mars. Congratulations, you have made it to the next round. Now, catch your breath. And I was really grateful for that last sentence, because I didn't read it. I read that and went, oh yeah, air. And then, boy, you get picked for one Mars mission. Suddenly everyone wants to hear you talk about space. So there I was in the Edmonton Sun, and in my home newspaper, and then on the radio, and on TV. All of a sudden, just emails start coming in. You know, I talked to one newspaper, and then someone else would see it, and they would want to talk to me. And I've never done this before. I don't know how to network with the media and whatnot. I know we're kind of supposed to do this, but this is all new to me. Nobody really paid attention to me before. So there I was, just in the media. And then the next step was the medical evaluation. So what we had to do, each candidate had to find a local physician to go through a list of tests that Mars One had assigned and make sure that we're physically fit and we don't have any diseases and whatnot, that we have good vision and good hearing. You know, we can really do this. We're in good shape. And so I did that and passed all the physical parameters, no problem, except for one, BMI, body mass index. They set a limit, BMI limit of 30, which the World Health Organization calls the obesity line. And I was 33.3 as of like 2 months ago, and I'm still about that. So I can't go to Mars because of my obesity. But I wasn't just going to let this dream go. So I submitted my medical, this sheet here, but I also wrote an email. A whopper of an email. Just paragraphs, all with little superscript numbers and references at the bottom. First of all, arguing that, well, you know, BMI doesn't actually distinguish between fat and muscle is denser than fat. And, you know, I climb a lot of mountains and, you know, wander off for weeks at a time into the wilderness, and I'm always running around, and, you know, I go hiking with people, and they're usually huffing and puffing behind me, and I'm kind of tapping my toes waiting for them, so I don't really think I'm in that terrible shape. And then I also argued, well, you know, Mars is cold. And if you look at like really cold. I mean, if you look at the weather reports from like Spirit and Curiosity, like, holy moly. So if we're going to send people to Mars, we need to send people who can handle the cold. And we know Neanderthals had high BMIs because they were adapted to the cold climate. And we know that non-African humans, 4% of their DNA comes from Neanderthals, and that those genes are not random. There's a definite selective bias toward cold adapted genes. Because equatorial people moved up into higher latitudes, and then they took these genes that have been evolving through all these glaciations and stuck them in their own genome to give themselves an advantage. And by stuck them in their own genome, I mean, could have been amazing, you don't know. And this holds true in modern humans as well. So a recent study found that the Greenland Inuit had a higher average BMI to begin with. It wasn't a matter of diet or anything, just they naturally have a high BMI. And they live in very cold climates. So again, you see the same thing, being larger to retain heat better. Whoops. Where did I go? No. There we go. So, it worked. I got a personal letter from Dr. Norbert Kraft, the Chief Medical Officer of Mars One, and it was one of his usually terse emails. You will move on with the selection. Hooray! And then on April 30th, they announced the beginning of round 2. So round 2 sort of consists of 2 parts. One is, you know, did everybody get in their medical and everybody's okay? And then the second part is interviews. So that's still coming up. Apparently I'll have to show my personality and my adaptability and my intelligence and my knowledge. So, working on it. They originally announced 706 candidates. They've changed that to 705, as I said. So I don't know exactly what happened there. But yeah, so here's the the latest letter that I got from them. So another hooray! Very excited. And so then there's another couple steps in the selection process coming up. And then in 2015, the training process begins. So they're building several of these sort of simulated Mars bases, and they're going to have us training in that for various periods of time. And we'll have to behave as if we're on Mars. You know, if you want to go outside, you put on your spacesuit and you cycle through the airlock, and everybody needs to know what you're doing. You got to check in, and then communications with Earth are going to be artificially delayed, like they would be because of the light travel time between Earth and Mars, which varies depending on where we are in our orbits. And then in 2018, they're sending a communication satellite and a lander. So the satellite will go into orbit around Mars and relay data from the base. And then the lander is based on the same design built by the same company as the Phoenix lander that NASA put on Mars in the northern polar region in 2008. And that one dug into the soil and found ice in the soil. So Mars One's using the same platform, just putting their own instrumentation in to assess the area for habitability. And because there's a lot of ice in the soil, and that's something that we're going to need. We're going to need water to sustain our settlement. And then 2020, they're setting up a communication satellite to put in Earth's L5 Lagrangian point, so that's in the same orbit as Earth, but lagging behind us by 60 degrees. And what that'll do is when Mars and Earth are on opposite sides of the sun, that'll relay communications because we can't talk through the sun, so we'll bounce it. There'll be a lot of communication delay, like over half an hour that it'll take each way. So you're waiting more than an hour. You say something on the phone, how's it going? And an hour later you hear back. Conversations are going to be difficult. And then they're putting a rover down, which can rove around and find a good landing spot and make sure everything's good and we're ready to start sending things to Mars. So cargo and the supplies to get the base up and running are sent in these. These are just modified Dragon capsules that SpaceX is sending up to the space station right now. And these land on the surface, and then the rovers put them together, attach them together. There's flexible solar panels in them that they unpack and lay out onto the desert, and they collect sunlight and give us our power. And so the rovers get it all up and running, making oxygen, making water, everything that we need, so we know we have a good viable base before anyone leaves the surface of the Earth. And then the first crew departs. So for each crew of 4 that's sent, it takes 4 launches of the Falcon Heavy rocket, which is currently in development by SpaceX. What this is it's 3 Falcon 9 rocket cores strapped together. So the Falcon 9 is what's currently resupplying the space station with Dragon capsule. So it's just 3 of these put together. And there's 4 launches of these. So the first one puts up the habitat. Oh, I have a laser, don't I? There we go. Oh, it's green. So there's our habitat. So that's one launch, and then one for this transit or propulsion module here, one for this one, and then the 4th and final launch is the crew in the Dragon capsule. All this is assembled in orbit. We come up, we attach to this, and then we begin our burn. And that gives us the delta V that we need to lift ourselves up out of Earth orbit and put us into orbit around the sun, an independent orbit from the Earth. No one's ever done that before. This is boldly going where no one has gone. And so I need to grab my thing here. Yes, I have props. And then we'll spend 210 days in interplanetary space. So we're going to watch the Earth just shrink and fade away and just become a dot, whose non-stellar nature is only betrayed by its relative motion among the background stars. And then ahead of us, a little orange speck that'll gradually get brighter. And interplanetary space is not empty. We'll feel like we're not moving. We'll just be floating there. We'll be looking out the windows and see the stars, and they won't move. But we're actually moving around 100,000 kilometers an hour. And interplanetary space is not empty because it's full of stuff like this. This is a space rock that came from the asteroid belt, traversed the space between Earth and Mars, and it wasn't alone. There's lots of these out there, and it only takes one this big to hit us at 100,000 kilometers an hour, and that's it. That's it. From Earth's perspective, our radio signal disappears. We don't show up on Mars at the scheduled time. You'll see it on the History Channel. The mystery of the lost expedition. It was aliens. But of course that's not going to happen. No, we're going to make it. And we're going to burn through the sky like a meteor at 2.5 kilometers an hour, which sheds some of our cosmic velocity. Then we deploy a supersonic parachute, which slows us down a little bit more, still not slow enough. Then as we get close to the surface, we cut the parachute, we fire the retro rockets, they lower us down, and we touch down so softly that we don't even die. And then, every 2 years, as Mars and Earth come into alignment for another launch window, another crew of 4 is sent, and we build up the base until there's 40 people living on Mars in these capsules. These are mostly for supplies and whatnot, and kind of used as airlocks. And then the actual habitats that we live in are these inflatable things that come off the back that we bury in soil to protect us from radiation. So what do we think we know about Mars? Things that we might discover. Well, from the missions that we've sent there, we think that 3.5 to 4 billion years ago, Mars looked something like this. That it had significant quantities of liquid water on its surface, and an atmosphere about 90% the thickness of Earth's. So, that's interesting, because Earth looked a lot like this back then as well. And 3.5 billion years ago, Earth had life. It was bacteria, but it was life. So if you had one world that looked like this and had life, could there have been 2? So here's a conglomerate that Curiosity found. You can see rounded pebbles laid down in a stream. Some good stuff, evidence of water. And does anyone remember this rock? The Allen Hills meteorite? No? Wow. Oh, you remember that? Okay. Yeah, this was found in Antarctica. It's a meteorite that came from Mars. So the asteroid hit Mars, blew off pieces. Some of them fell to Earth. Now, most Mars rocks are 1 to 2-ish billion years old. This one was 4.1 billion years old, which means it was sitting around when Mars was wet like that, probably was getting rained on and sat in water. And they found that it had carbonate deposits in it that form in water. And when they looked at these under an electron microscope, they found this. And they're still arguing about what this is and other ones like this. Some scientists at the time suggested maybe it's fossil bacteria. And even President Clinton made a speech about it. There's a clip of it in the movie Contact. You ever seen that movie? Yeah! How did they get Bill Clinton to talk about aliens? So very exciting stuff. We don't know right now if Mars had life on it or not. Of course, resources. For any settlement, very important that we know we have resources. Water. Mars has lots of water in the soil, quite significant quantities, especially up towards the northern polar region. So they're going to set us down somewhere around, what I've heard was 40-45 degrees latitude north, somewhere in that area, we think. They haven't really given a lot of information yet. They're still working this out as they go along. That's what Apollo did. No, JFK said, we're going to go to the moon within this decade. And NASA went, well, how the hell will we do this? We'll figure it out. And they did. Mars One will figure it out too. So, that's probably where they're going to land us. Lots of water there. Air, very important. So Mars' atmosphere is almost entirely carbon dioxide. It's about 95% carbon dioxide. So we can convert that into oxygen, just add energy, split the carbon off the oxygen, there we go, we can breathe that. We can also split water. Mainly ours is going to come from the carbon dioxide, but either of those will give you oxygen. Of course, it gives you a bunch of carbon and hydrogen that you have to spare. Well, you can put those together and get methane, and then combine that with some of the oxygen that you have, and you have fuel. You can burn. Because you can't just burn fuel in the air on Mars, because it's carbon dioxide, right? No oxygen. Energy, solar, big, huge solar farm. There's some challenges with that, I'll get to those in a second. Food we grow indoors, so this is the inside of one of those inflatable habitats. Here's where we live. We got space suits, we got a screen, apparently, which looks like a pretty decent screen. They haven't told us much about it. But cool! Probably video games, setting out radiation storms. And then we have a hydroponic, not really a greenhouse, because it's not letting sunlight in, where we have grow lights that are powering that. And then challenges. Of course, every exploration has its own set of challenges. Mars certainly has its own set. Radiation is a significant one. You Earthlings. Down here, under your huge magnetic field and bloated atmosphere, complaining about the weather. Do you know what a solar proton storm is? No. You complain about Earth weather. Water falls out of the sky. Makes everything wet. And sometimes it's frozen. Oh. Yeah, every cosmic fart is going to have us on the run. Every coronal mass ejection, every starquake on some magnetar in the next arm of the galaxy, every gamma ray burst from the beginning of time near the edge of the known universe. And we're going to be huddled in our little artificial caves. Because it rains cancer on Mars. Global dust storms. Sometimes the wind picks up dust and sand and throws it up into the air, and for months at a time, it'll block out sunlight. We are solar powered. That's a problem. Hopefully we're going to have some kind of backup. I'm thinking thorium breeder reactor. Send up thorium, not too big a deal if we explode and sprinkle it across the Pacific. Thorium is pretty common, Earth's crust, not that radioactive. Extreme cold. In the daytime, it'll, this is from the Curiosity rover, and it's about 4 degrees south latitude, I think, something like that. And it'll be about 0 degrees during the day, and then it plummets to minus 100 at night. Because Mars doesn't have liquid water or a thick atmosphere to buffer temperature. Cold as hell. And then probably the biggest challenge that we're going to have. Mechanical and electrical failures. Continuous problem. Here on Earth, no problem. Yeah, throw it out, buy a new one. Not going to work on Mars. Now, a lot of things we can fix. We can harden things up as much as we can, put in as much redundancy, but there's some things you just can't fix. Once you let the magic blue smoke out of an integrated circuit, that's it. There's a lot of valleys on Mars. There's no Silicon Valley. Now, let's say that we make it to Mars, we survive, we have 40 people living there, and then things keep going and other companies come in, other governments, we start building up a population on Mars, there's 1,000 people, there's 10,000 people, we develop the ability to build new habitat and everything that we need to survive on Mars without any longer being dependent on resupply missions from Earth. And then, let's say something happens on Earth. There's some economic backslide where space travel is not affordable anymore, say caused by, I don't know, climatological difficulties? Now you'll have two populations in two completely different environments, separated by an impassable barrier. Any evolutionary biologists know what happens under this situation? You get a new species. And apologies to Kim Stanley Robinson, I totally stole his species name from the Mars trilogy. Anyone's read that? I'm on book 2, don't tell me how it ends. Free Mars! And Mars is only the beginning. I mean, if anybody's been following Kepler and the other discoveries over the last 20 years of exoplanets, amazing. Something like half of stars, at least in the galactic disk, have planetary systems. And many of them have Earth-sized worlds in their habitable zones. Now, all the worlds here we can reach with current propulsion technologies on timescales of hundreds of thousands of years. Except for that one on the end, that we can get to in months. You can be standing on the surface of Earth, and then on the surface of Mars, without having celebrated a single birthday in the interim. A sub-Terran world, almost in the habitable zone, with a known history of liquid water. That's amazing! And it's only the beginning. Once we learn how to settle worlds, we have a long ways to go. There's something like 100 billion stars in our galaxy, half of them with planetary systems. Where are we going to be in our deep future? 60,000 years from now? Are we just going to stay here? Or are we going to keep doing what we've been doing throughout our entire history? Spreading, diversifying, developing new languages and cultures and who knows what. And every journey begins with the first step, and there's ours. Hanging out in the constellation Virgo, Virgin Land. Right now, you can go outside and see it. We just passed our closest approach. There it is. Thank you all for listening to me tonight.
Is there a question?
I think he was first.
Cool. Kurt?
Yeah, does Martian have a magnetic field to protect against radiation?
No, it has. There's like some ghost magnetism left in some of the rocks that tell us that it once had a magnetic field, but not anymore. They think it probably, because it's smaller, it cooled off faster, its core stopped spinning, and so it no longer generates a magnetic field. And that's why they think it lost a lot of its atmospheres, because solar charged particle radiation is normally deflected by magnetic fields, then ionized the atmosphere and stripped it away.
So its core is probably solid, is what they think.
It might still be partially liquid. I don't really know. I'm not a planetary geologist. I have to read up on it a little bit more. But...
I can interrupt.
Yeah, go for it. Go ahead. No.
It's because its surface area to volume ratio is so high. It cooled rapidly, and its core is probably quite small now and viscous, and it's not turning over to produce a magnetic field.
Cool. Thank you.
What do you say? Anyone else? Oh, Don, yeah. You've earned the next question.
That 29 minutes passed like that. That was great.
Oh, thank you.
I have some problems with so this 200-day mission, you're in weightless conditions.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to train? Because the Soviets and the Americans train like mad, and all they're doing is slowing the decay rate of their bone mineralization and their muscle tension. He'll repeat it.
Yeah. So the question is about, we'll be in 0G for 210 days, and that causes a lot of problems with degradation of muscle and bone. I mean, if anyone's followed Chris Hadfield, he was on the space station for 6 months. He came back and he was in terrible condition. Well, when we get to Mars, fortunately, it's only a third Earth gravity, so the problem of adapting to gravity shouldn't be quite as bad when we get there, but it's still not going to be pleasant. I mean, they're giving us 2 days to just sit in the capsule and vomit our guts out. We're going to be in terrible condition, yeah. Hopefully we'll be in good enough condition that we can get everything operating. I mean, 1/3 gravity will be a lot lighter. It's not going to be as bad. But honestly, we don't know. And we don't know what the really long-term effects are of people living in 1/3 gravity. Because no one's ever done that before. We have no idea. I mean, absolutely, there's so many unknowns. I mean, they're just launching people off to somewhere where they can't get any help and they can't come back, and we don't know what challenges we're going to face. We could all die there. I mean, that's... Yeah.
How will you let us know?
By radio. We got this wonderful communications system that's coming up. So, and actually, it's not just talking by radio. We're going to have cameras there and everything. This is going to be, because the way that they're getting the funding is they're making a television show out of it.
Skype.
Skype? Yeah, it's something like Skype. Except you can't have a live conversation with, half an hour of light travel delay. You can't talk like you and I are talking.
It's going to be called the Housewives of Red Planet? Or?
Yeah, something. I don't know what they're going to do if you get voted off. Jump.
All right. That's good.
That's it?
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.